The strangest thing about Princess Leonor lately isn't what the cameras show. It's what they suddenly cut away from. That's the part nobody talks about. Because over the last few weeks, I started noticing a pattern in royal coverage around Princess Leonor. The official clips are becoming shorter, more polished, more controlled, and weirdly, the more perfect they try to make her look, the more human she accidentally feels. Especially in the moments they don't want people focusing on. A tired expression after an event. A pause before answering someone. That quick glance toward the ground when cameras get too close. Those tiny details say more about Leonor than 1,000 palace headlines ever could. And honestly, I think the version of Leonor the public connects with most is the exact version traditional royal media keeps trying to edit out. Not the future queen, the young woman underneath the role. While Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, still operate inside that classic polished royal structure in Britain, Leonor feels like she belongs to a completely different era of monarchy. One where emotional authenticity matters more than royal perfection. And weirdly, I think even people who don't follow royal news closely can sense that shift. Because in 2026, audiences trust flaws more than flawless branding. That changes everything. And honestly, if Mr. Beast were secretly advising the Spanish monarchy's PR team, he'd probably tell them to stop over-editing Leonor and let people see the reality instead. Because reality creates emotional investment. Perfection creates distance. And monarchy survives on emotional investment now. Not mystery. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe. I post every day. Because I genuinely think we're watching something bigger happen here than people realize. This isn't just about royal appearances anymore. It's about identity. Specifically, the identity Leonor is slowly building underneath decades of palace tradition. And here's my hot take. I think the palace still wants the public to see Leonor primarily as a symbol. But the public increasingly sees her as a person first. That tension is becoming impossible to hide. And honestly, it might become the defining challenge of her future reign one day. Because if you really pay attention, the most interesting Leonor moments are never the official speeches or staged ceremonies. It's the unscripted reactions, the uncomfortable pauses, the moments where she briefly forgets to perform royalty. That's the Leonor nobody shows you in the news. And weirdly, that's the Leonor people seem to care about most. Now let me explain why I think this matters more than people assume. Royal institutions traditionally survive by controlling narrative. Every image, every outfit, every public interaction is carefully designed to reinforce stability. But younger audiences today don't emotionally connect with stability alone. They connect with honesty. And Leonor exists in the first generation of monarchy fully shaped by social media psychology. That's huge. Because social media changed what leadership looks like emotionally. The old royal model was distance. The new public model is relatability. That's why someone can become globally famous now simply by appearing emotionally real online. And I honestly think Leonor understands that better than many palace advisors do. Not because she's rebellious, because she grew up in the internet era. She understands instinctively that audiences analyze energy now, not just titles. People watch body language, tone, facial expressions, awkwardness, vulnerability. That's why even tiny Leonor moments explode online. People aren't just studying royalty anymore. They're studying humanity under pressure. And honestly, I think that's what makes her compelling. Because underneath all the uniforms and protocols, Leonor often looks like someone carrying responsibilities that arrived far too early. There's a seriousness in her expressions sometimes that feels older than her age. Not dramatic, just heavy. And I think the palace unintentionally makes this more obvious by trying too hard to smooth everything out. Because the more edited the public image becomes, the more audiences search for the real person underneath it. That happens with celebrities too. With influencers. With politicians. Actually, the more I think about it, modern royals are basically trapped between celebrity culture and constitutional duty. That sounds exhausting. Especially for someone like Leonor, who didn't choose visibility, she inherited it. Now here's something I've personally noticed that almost nobody discusses. Leonor rarely seems obsessed with attention itself. That's important. A lot of public figures today chase visibility constantly. Leonor often looks like someone managing visibility carefully instead. And honestly, that restraint may be one of the reasons people trust her more. Because she doesn't always look comfortable being watched. Ironically, that discomfort makes her feel authentic. And authenticity is the most valuable currency in public life now. That's why the perfect princess narrative actually weakens her image sometimes. It removes the emotional complexity people relate to. The real Leonor, the version hidden behind polished reporting, appears thoughtful, cautious, sometimes overwhelmed, occasionally awkward, and honestly, those qualities make her more compelling than perfection ever could. But there's another side to this story that fascinates me. The palace may actually fear too much authenticity. Seriously, because monarchy depends on symbolic power. If royals become too emotionally accessible, some of the institutional mystique disappears. That creates a strange balancing act. Leonor has to feel human enough for people to connect with, but royal enough for the institution to survive. That's almost impossible in the digital era. And honestly, I don't think older generations fully understand how brutal that pressure is now. Every expression becomes analysis. Every interaction becomes content. Every appearance becomes psychological interpretation online. That environment changes people, fast. And maybe that's why Leonor sometimes looks emotionally guarded even in relaxed moments. Not because she's cold, because she's aware that the internet never stops observing. And here's where things become really interesting to me. I think audiences are beginning to separate Palace Leonor from real Leonor in their minds. That's dangerous for the institution, but potentially powerful for her personally. Because once people emotionally invest in the person underneath the title, criticism changes. It becomes more protective, more empathetic. That's exactly what happened with several modern public figures across entertainment, sports, and even politics. The audience stops following the role. They start following the human story. And honestly, I think Leonor's human story is far more emotional than official coverage allows people to see. Because imagine growing up knowing your future identity was decided before you understood yourself. Imagine realizing every friendship, every relationship, every mistake could become international discussion. That's not normal pressure. That's psychological conditioning. And I sometimes wonder whether the real Leonor only appears in tiny accidental moments now because she's spent years learning how to protect herself emotionally in public. That would make sense. Actually, it would explain a lot. The pauses, the carefulness, the restraint, and honestly, I think audiences sense it intuitively. People can tell when someone is carrying invisible pressure. That's why Leonor's stories spread so quickly online now. Not because people only care about crowns, but because they recognize emotional weight. And maybe that's the biggest thing the news never fully captures. Leonor doesn't feel compelling because she's a princess. She feels compelling because she sometimes looks like a normal person trapped inside an extraordinary system trying very hard not to lose herself. That's relatable, painfully relatable, actually, and honestly, that may become her greatest strength someday. Because modern monarchy probably won't survive through perfection anymore. It'll survive through emotional credibility. Through whether people genuinely believe the person wearing the crown understands pressure, uncertainty, loneliness, and responsibility in a human way. And the version of Leonor nobody shows you in the news. That quieter, more reflective, more emotionally real version. I think that's the version people are starting to believe in most.